And we're back, and it is Monday night. I hope you guys had a good start to your week. We're going to run it down tonight on the live. I'm going to try to cough. Oh, my hair is wild. It's going to get cut tomorrow, so it's okay. Anyway, we're going to run it down tonight. Ask me anything. Lots of wild things happening in the markets. I don't know. I'm sure, unless you've been living under a rock, you're paying attention to Japan. There was a lot of comments made last night about their market. The Nikkei being down 4% off the open, and then holding. Bank of Japan looked like they stepped in and printed a little money and bought up the stock market to make sure that it didn't fall any further than that and exacerbate the unwind. Which so if you go back to August last year, that is really kind of what the leading indicator was that things were going to unwind for the reverse carry trade. If you want to watch something, there's three different things I watch for the reverse carry trade. One is the Nikkei, which is the stock market in Japan. It's finally back to all-time highs that it hasn't seen since the 1980s. Japan has had three pretty much lost decades because of economic circumstances and global trade. And the way that they've had to position themselves and hold U.S. treasuries. And anyway, a lot of that's coming to an end. Their economy is picking up. And with that, GDP is rising. Interest rates are starting to rise to be able to quell inflation. And so a lot of that money that's been borrowed over there is starting to have to be paid back because it's been a lot of money, like a lot of money. Like I don't think people understand how much money has been borrowed from the Bank of Japan in yen and then swapped over to dollars and put to work across global markets. When we do see the sell-off of the reverse carry trade, it's not like it's just going to be risk on assets. It's going to be everything. Gold will plummet. Silver will plummet. Crypto will plummet. All of it. All at the same time. Because that's going to be tens of trillions of dollars. It's a global margin call. Which is what's going to happen. But anyway, so the three indicators, I watch the 10-year yield in the JPY 10-year yield. Once it gets over 1.6, they're really going to have to raise interest rates there in Japan. And I think it's going to be a full 50 basis points. I think they're going to go all the way to 1% off the jump with an emergency rate hike. And that is going to be the domino that kicks everything else over for what we've talked about. Thermal Predator is asked if I could. He said, "Is your reset domino theory reset domino theory going to happen here soon?" It's predicated on the reverse carry trade in Japan unwinding, and that'll dump U.S. Treasuries onto the market. So anyway, I need to consolidate and keep on one track here. So three things I watch: the Nikkei. If there is a big sell-off in the Nikkei, that tends to lead sell-offs in the U.S. markets the next day. The JPY 10-year yield, and then excuse me, the yen versus the dollar, and then how much inflation is happening. So when the yen depreciates substantially against the dollar, there's more inflation there in Japan. When things rise quickly, them raising interest rates would quell inflation and make their currency stronger against ours, if that makes sense. So that's going to happen in the very near future. How much further then can they kick the can? A couple weeks ago, I said maybe 90 days. I don't think they're going to make it that long. I think it's going to be here in April that we see things kick off, and a lot of changes happen very quickly when that happens. So we get into that. We'll get into a lot more here tonight. Happy to answer any questions that you guys have. Again, I'm going to try to run them all down here in the chat over here on TikTok, on YouTube, and X. And I appreciate you guys being here with me. Do these every Monday and Wednesday night, as long as I'm not traveling. So we got one here from CC2424, 2424. They say, are we seeing a downturn in the market because of the reverse carry trade or just tariffs? So it's absolutely the reverse carry trade. Excuse me. And here's the other piece. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So people hold this money out in anticipation of making good returns to be able to service the debt or pay the loans back in full. But if the returns continue to get worse and worse, this is the worst quarter on record for the U.S. stock market in comparison to other markets in like 30-something years. It's been a long time since it's been this bad, and we've seen 20% down from the top over one quarter, and I think we closed there. So this is going to be logged as one of the worst quarters in U.S. history for the stock market. So with that, again, the returns that people are generating on treasuries or anything else are dropping significantly in comparison to what they have been for, the past couple decades in reality. There's been some times when, there's been large pullbacks, but those have been opportunities, and we've continued to see upside for exponential lengths of time beyond that. 4-year cycles, you can kind of predict that. So that's what I think. Tariffs are a narrative that the media is putting out. Tariffs they're not going to cause inflation. I know that that's counterintuitive to what people think, especially if we're putting tariffs on other people's products coming into the U.S. And I know that's like a kind of people playing chicken, but you have to, right? If people are going to put tariffs on us, we should put tariffs on them. And that's also, you have the leverage too. So Trump, I don't remember who he was talking to. I think it was, maybe it was Canada. And, he told them that we would put stuff on wine and something else that was a huge export for them. They said, whoa. We'll back off on what we're doing. So we'll see what actually gets finalized on, what is it going to be, Wednesday this week on the 2nd. We'll know if what we're going to get for the tariffs. But I think that's just a narrative that the media is putting out. All of what you're seeing right now is the reverse carry trade unwinding in slow motion. We've seen it start to get paid back, and people start to move collateral since August of last year, when it really started to unwind at scale. And then there's been other people that have re-leveraged and had worse returns over this quarter. So when it starts to move, and we do see, and again, as soon as Japan raises interest rate, or as soon as we lower interest rates, they know that it all unwinds, and that's what's happening. That's what you're watching right now. Warren Buffett would be on the sideline with $334 billion in treasuries if that wasn't the case. We've got a super chat from Rich Fishing. He says, thank you for the super chat, Rich. He says, hey, Jake, what catalysts do you feel are most likely to happen in 2025 that will result in price action? Additionally, where do you see price action going by the end of the year? Your best guess. So again, this is just going to go, back to the domino theory. I put this out a little over a year ago, but there may be many people that aren't aware of it. Excuse me. I've got a cough, and I'm probably going to continue to do that. I have hot tea here, but I apologize for the disruption. So reverse carry trade unwinds. Huge amount of liquidity moves out of markets and rushes to pay back those loans. You have a liquidity crisis globally, as there's a global margin call. U.S. treasuries get dumped on the market at scale, deleveraging the treasury market, which is a problem. The U.S. dollar is a tier 1 asset in the banking system. If it were to become not riskless, it would be a very big problem. It's the backbone of derivatives and other products and services and everything globally in reality. So if there were a deleveraging on that, everything else would collapse too. So the U.S. will rush through stablecoin regulation here. That gives full clarity to XRP as a bridge asset or a bridge currency in the way that the legislation is drafted currently. And on the other side of that, we would see Tether potentially get sanctioned. They would then have recourse against them because Tether is not backed by all cash or dollar denominated assets. That they've got some commercial paper, and they also have Bitcoin on the balance sheet for 3 to 5%. And a portion that's locked up in a lawsuit with Celsius. So they wouldn't be able to sell it and get right even if they wanted to. And obviously they don't want to because they didn't comply with MiCA in the EU. And I think tomorrow they will be completely delisted from all the platforms there. We've already seen crypto.com delist them. And I think you could see other US exchanges delist Tether in the very near future. But what does that do? So that causes a liquidity crisis across crypto exchanges, Bitcoin to collapse on itself. We haven't seen a 30, 40, 50, 60% drawdown in Bitcoin in a single day since the ETFs have been established and in place. If we saw that, I think traders would run for the hills. They're not diamond hands. They're not here for the long term. They're here for the gain. This person's asked, why would they delist Tether? They're not compliant. If they pass stablecoin regulation, they would not meet the requirements for the stablecoin regulation as the way it sits today. And they may not delist it. I think that they will sanction it and they will freeze it. I think it could be around over the long term. I just think in the short term, it makes a lot of sense for large players that want to move into the market with stable coins to have the way to do that if Tether is no longer in the way. And I think that that'll be orchestrated for them. Google, Apple, Amazon, and the like. So anyway, they rushed through stablecoin regulation to save the back end of the bond market and treasuries. You get a ton, you get a bunch of stable coins launched to soak up those treasury bills. And you also have a deleveraging of, Bitcoin in that process because the investment banks hold spot or have spot ETFs. They'll have huge unrealized losses. Won't be able to pull from the traditional stock market to cover that because it's going to be affected by the reverse carry trade. There's already going to be a ton of downward pressure. So the only way they'll be able to de-risk from that is if they can settle real time on the back end of the stock market. Bitcoin doesn't settle real time, but it's much faster than T+1. In 2024, May 28th, they passed legislation to move to T+1 for the back end of the stock market with the option to settle real time through a digital asset if there's enough liquidity. In 2022, Project Ion was finalized with the DTCC, and they have the capability to settle through XRP for the back end of the stock market. Again, it would need regulatory clarity and enough liquidity in the asset to be able to do that. Looking at easily 4 digits would be required. And the way that they would get it to that price would be through a supply and demand shock. One, from the exchanges having to use it to be able to settle their trades and source liquidity. And the other, you can look up the Shane Ellis theory if you want to understand that better. That's where 589 comes from for the XRP community. And then the ETFs are going to be the main way that they drive institutional liquidity and mountains of liquidity into XRP all at one time. There's only about 1 billion XRP left on the exchanges for them to purchase. So if there are huge volumes moving into those ETFs, which are all backed by 20, 30, 40, 50 XRP, it would be an astronomical amount of XRP that would be required from if we did really get 8 billion in inflows the first day, which I know sounds high. Bitcoin was like 400 million the first day, but you got twice the amount of ETFs that Bitcoin had, all launching at the same time. There are a portion of those that are futures ETFs. I found out the other day they're not spot. About half of those are spot ETFs, and the other half are other products. Bitcoin already had futures through the CME and other stuff on it prior to the spot ETFs being launched, whereas XRP does not. So that still drives volume. It's in a different mechanism, but it'll still drive volume in purchasing of XRP. So anyway, all that plays out. I think it's highly likely if we do see the unwind or the reverse carry trade that XRP could be trading north of 4 digits in the very near future, if that's the case, and my theory holds true. There's a bunch of segues there where it might not unfold in that exact manner, and maybe pit stops along the way that could play out. But even, if it's just the ETFs that they launch and we don't get the other catalyst that would drive the supply shock, you're still looking at somewhere between $10 and $50 XRP fairly easily. So again, my guesses or predictions are predicated on certain events transpiring in a specific order. It's not like it's a magical crystal ball and this is just going to happen overnight and all the other stuff that you hear about out there. These are real world global macroeconomic events that have to transpire for this to actually happen. So anyway, hopefully that gives you a good idea there, Rich. That may have been more than you wanted, but thank you for the super chat and asking great questions. We got Wayne. He says, will banks only use Ripple's ODL instead of XRP? From what I understand, they can use ODL only without ever using XRP ever. Is there any truth to that? And why would they use XRP if ODL is the same? A great question. So right now, they have to convert from fiat to XRP. And the intermediary that does that is Uphold. They have an agreement with them. Spoke with Simon a couple hours in 2020, a couple hours after he signed that agreement in 2023. Was in Austin, Texas, and sat down and had some whiskey with him. So Ripple sends the XRP to Uphold. Uphold swaps that for whatever dollars the bank wants. They send that to the bank. The bank then uses it for 7 days. They pay the interest back in whatever currency they borrowed. That's then swapped to XRP, and then that's paid back to Ripple. Unless they want to settle into a foreign jurisdiction. So let's say they wanted to settle a payment between them. Ripple could loan them the XRP to do that and take a fee for that, which would still be cheaper than them going through intermediary banks. And that's most likely going to be used in an instance where the counterparty doesn't want to hold the other country's currency. So Turkish lira, Argentinian peso, Zimbabwe dollar, all of these currencies that have been in hyperinflation during the past 3-4 years. You don't necessarily want to hold a large amount of money in that jurisdiction to be able to settle into it because you're going to have to hold it in their currency at a bank there. And that, nostro vostro means yours and ours. And it's basically my money at your bank is the way that it is if you're the one, putting up the capital to be able to settle there. And so XRP provides a really good tool to be able to settle into those jurisdictions. And so I've explained why, it works today and people would use it, and you wouldn't hold XRP yourself, and you could just use that. Now, there is a circumstance in the future where that changes. And that is going to be predicated on banks issuing stable coins of their own. So now they're digitally native, and they might issue those on the XRPL. And in that circumstance, it could make a lot of sense for them to just utilize XRP to settle between counterparties in a trustless fashion over the mainnet. And they would have to source and purchase XRP, send it over the network. It would settle in the counterparty's account. They would then sell out of it into whatever currency they wanted, whatever stable coin they wanted on the other side of the transaction. And it would be the intermediary asset for those things. And in that circumstance, you may want to hold some XRP yourself in case you can't source some on the open market, or you don't want to have to pay Ripple the fees to be able to use it, right? And so on the other side of no longer having just fiat currencies and moving to stable coins and CBDCs and some of the other options that'll be created for payment. I think the majority of those for back-end settlement, high-value payments for institutions will end up on the XRPL. We've seen Japan very confident that all of their banks are going to be using XRP this year. From SBI and Yoshitaka Kitao, he stated that. You've got the Bank of Brazil also trialing their CBDC on the XRPL. You've got a lot of other BRICS nations that may be announced in the near future or have been announced in the past, trialing their CBDC or stable coins on the XRPL. Excuse me. Let me get a drink. So that's where this takes a turn, and people want to utilize and hold XRP is on the other side of stablecoin regulation and the implementation of those. As long as it remains fiat, to your point, it would be easier to just borrow that from Ripple and use ODL in that circumstance. But again, I think that's going to change in the near future. And it's a great question, Wayne. A lot of people ask that same question. Max says, smash the like button. I don't say it enough. If you wouldn't mind, please click that like button. Let me know what you think in the comments, and subscribe if you're getting value from this. Appreciate you guys being here on a Monday night. Excuse me. D-Rat says, do you think when this thing unwinds and everything crashes that we'll be able to capitalize and purchase crypto, or do you think exchanges will have issues when this happens? They're for sure going to have issues. Like, especially if Tether gets sanctioned, like they don't have the liquidity. They don't have a way to settle, especially if you're settling large trades. Like if you wanted to move large amounts in and out, good luck. I don't know if you've ever tried to buy with USDC, but like the volume on XRP is like $5,000 or $6,000 maximum. You're going to have a ton of slippage. You're going to miss out on opportunities. It's not. It's going to be difficult to capitalize on unless you have an OTC desk that can source liquidity from private parties in that circumstance that do want to sell it at that price, which is highly unlikely. Maybe they have a limit order down there or something, or an option that people have purchased. There may be a few ways to do it, but it's going to be few and far between. It's a good question, though. Again, and I haven't mentioned this, but if you guys are interested in joining the mastermind, we do stuff like this every Monday and Saturday. We run down Q&A. We talk about global macroeconomics, and we run private deals there in the group that I can't discuss here on a public forum. They are 506B, Reg D funds for fintech companies, many of which you know and like. Can't say the names, can't raise publicly for them. But if you do want to learn more about that, we would love to have you there in the group. And you can use the code here in the bottom left-hand corner. Beyond Broke 1, the letters MO, like month, or Mary Oscar, gets you a free month there in the group in Carbon 1 or Social. Carbon 1 is what it takes to participate in the private equity deals that we run there in the group. We've got DKNY 767. They say, thank you for the super chat. They say, thank you, brother. Thank you for being one of the voices of logic and accurate information. I appreciate that. I do my best to do that. I try to look, these things are possible, but they come with conditions, right? It's not like just this magical flip of the switch deal. Refreshing amongst all the hopium and FUD all over the socials. I'm committed to tuning in, out the crap and sticking to the facts. That's the way I am. I want it to be backed up, but I also want people to think critically through things. I think there's a lot of people that poo-poo on specific scenarios or don't think things would transpire. And that's okay. You know, I'm happy to debate people and go back and forth as long as it's a respectful conversation. Unfortunately, a lot of people just use cuss words and don't really have a point in their argument. So I haven't been on Twitter Spaces in a while, and that was my recent feeling. Anyway, so I enjoy these. I really like the questions that you guys provide. I think that they're really respectful, and you guys are always asking good stuff. So again, thank you for the super chat, and appreciate the kind words. We have a couple more super chats here. We've got the Munition Dummy. Interesting. Thank you for the super chat. They say, so Crypto Hulk says, oh boy, Crypto Hulk, that the price action of XRP isn't moving because institutions are being set up in dark pools. Any truth to that? No. I literally have a person that is currently reaching out to Ripple about setting up dark pools on the XRPL because they don't exist. So no, that's not the case. There's not like you could have OTC desks and you could buy over the counter and it wouldn't affect price. The reason that the price has stayed where it is and it's trading in the range that it is institutions are moving in through TWAP and VWAP. Okay, so if you don't know what those terms mean, it's a time-weighted volume average, which means if you're going to buy $50 million, $100 million worth of something, you don't do it one big whack. There's going to be a ton of slippage. It's going to cause market volatility. There's problems, even through the OTC desk. Like if you're moving that much and it's not through a counterparty transaction and you are buying off of the exchanges or sourcing liquidity from some of them, it's going to cause an issue. So that's a lot. So what they do is they average into the market over a period of time. So if you had $50 or $100 million that you wanted to put into XRP, you would do it through an algorithm trading system over a month, okay, or 2 months, where you would average into the market and try to get the best prices over that period of time. And the trading team that you used would be compensated if they were to beat the average. They take the opposite side of it. So these people exist. We know who they are. I've referred clients to them. And yeah, that's the tool that the institutions are using, in my opinion. You know, again, This is my opinion, just based on price action and the things I know about and what exists out there. That's what's holding price here, and why you're not seeing significant moves to the upside is because they are averaging it in the market. There's enough volume to hold the price in the range that it's at, but not enough to push it up, because you're not seeing large buy volume come in all at the same time. It's just averaged out over an extended period to be able to get the best entry point now that we have moved up from 50 cents. Beyond that, we have Monopoly Money. What's going on? Thank you for the super chat. They say, hey man, people are stressing hard over the private ledger. Could you expand on this and its effect on the public ledger? Thanks. Or if any, thanks. So Ripple does have replicas of the XRPL that they've trialed with institutions. The asset that's on them is not XRP, but they're not interconnected. And I think that's where people get messed up. So if you wanted to trade between you and a counterparty that you don't trust, let's say US wants to send Russia a transaction, or a US bank wants to send a Russian bank something for a commodity trade out of there. Or if another country in NATO wanted to transact with somebody that they didn't trust. If you're in a siloed ecosystem, it's very similar to the web in the early or late 80s, early 90s, before the internet. So I don't know if you guys remember this or not. I was too young, to be honest with you, but like if you had an AOL email, you could only email other people that had an AOL email. And you weren't able to, like right now, if I've got PayPal, I can't send money to Cash App, right? You have to have the same app. It's very similar for the movement of money. What this technology does, and the XRPL does, is allows for interoperability between those siloed ecosystems and to settle those payments. So that's the main net. So these private ledgers have issued assets on them. Again, they're replicas of the XRPL. They could be side chains. There's a bunch of different circumstances where you'd have a private environment to be able to settle transactions between, multiple banks that you have, locations, reconcile ledgers, counterparties, bank accounts. There's a lot of reasons that you would have a private permissioned ecosystem that would want to be interoperable with a mainnet. And that's what these private ledgers are. So people that say, oh, they'll just use the private ledgers and they won't use the mainnet. They're going to have to. Like, they're not going to be able to send value to a counterparty that they don't have a trust line with or some other relationship with. And that's the benefit. Like, you can send to anybody free in seconds. It's not quite free. It's a little, there's a gas fee. But aside from that, it's pretty free. And it's only going to take two banks that start using the mainnet to be able to settle transactions. Because of the cost reduction that they're going to see, everybody will pile in immediately after that. So this person says, I understood that the private ledger and the retail ledger are supposed to fix eventually. Yeah, so once there's enough liquidity in XRP to be able to settle transactions that might be moving over these private ledgers, or the transactions may not be even moving over them, just so you're aware. Like, it could be running in tandem. So that's what Project Ion is doing, and with the back end of the stock market since 2022, it runs the same data, but it can't settle those transactions because there's not enough liquidity in XRP to do it. Once they drive the price to XRP to a high enough level that those transactions can settle, those will start moving over the mainnet. And when they do, it'll hold price stability there, because that's the price that's going to be required to be able to transact that amount of volume or those transactions. So you're going to see steps up in the price of XRP as they're driving the price up. It will hold. I don't think you're going to see the big pullback that a lot of people are anticipating. Most people are like, it's going to go to $10 to $13 and then it's going to pull back down. I could be wrong. I could definitely be wrong, but that's not what I'm anticipating. I'm anticipating a larger step up than $10 to $13, somewhere around $50, and I think it'll maintain and hold there. And then people will try to be figuring out what's going on, and then it will step up again because there'll be something else that causes a supply shock. So we'll see. Kurt, thank you for the super chat, brother. Hope you and your family are doing well. He says, great interview with Graham. Now that Archax can tokenize U.S. Securities and regulation bills about to pass, it seems like things are primed for a great 2025. Thanks for all you do. FYI, I see XRP at end of year at least 1K as well. See, Kurt knows. Kurt knows what's going on. Appreciate you, brother. Yeah, and if you guys didn't go check out that interview with Graham Rodford, we did post that earlier today. They announced that they did purchase a broker-dealer here in the U.S. To be able to transact U.S. regulated securities and enter this market. It's something that we are addressing at Digital Wealth Partners, which is the wealth management firm that I, own underneath Digital Ascension Group, and we provide all the services to our clients for their XRP. Actually, the funds are going to go live this week on Thursday. So we will start generating returns on XRP in cash and in kind for our clients in a very regulated, buttoned up, secure. That's not no risk. There are some risks, but it's very low risk in comparison to DeFi or any of the other options that exist today or will, even in the near future. I'm pretty confident. And we're also, talking to Ripple about some things we can do with them. So in the near future, we will have some other options that are yield. So today we have returns. Returns are not consistent income, but they tend to be higher, right? So they're higher risk than yield. Yield tends to be lower returns, but with a specific cadence. So as an example, if you knew you were going to get a 5% or let's say 6% on a U.S. Treasury, and it was a 12-month Treasury, you're going to get 0.5% per month, right? That's how you would think about that. So that would be yield. Whereas, let's say returns, you're going to get 13% return over the 12 months. It's not going to be 1% per month. It might be 0.25%, 1.5%, 3%, -1%. You're going to have a change over each month, but at the aggregate total at the end, it would be 13. So that would be returns versus yield. We currently have returns. We will be generating yield in the near future with the DR product that we launched with RDC. So Armani John, he says, thank you for the super chat, by the way. He says, hey, Jake, appreciate the great work and accurate info. Thank you, sir. Thank you for the kind words. He says, what's your take on XRP and Flare with F assets coming on board? Think Flare will be a major player in the game anchored by XRP's success. I would agree with that. I think that the majority of the people that hold Flare are actually banks and institutions, because that's who would have been around and held large amounts in 2020 when the snapshot was taken on December 12th. I was around for that. I was actually looking at the rich list at the time. There were 2.7 million wallets back in the day when that was taken. A long time ago. There's currently 6 million wallets today, so more than double here almost 4.5 years later. But yeah, I think the institutions are definitely on board with Flare. Talking to Hugo at Digital Wealth Partners about how we can integrate that with our offering and offer a mint FXRP and how we can generate returns on XRP with F assets. Bitcoin is another one. We have clients that hold large amounts of Bitcoin that they want to be able to generate a return on their Bitcoin. They've changed the way that things are structured from the way it used to be. There's been a lot of iterations for Hugo. We know that Ripple funded them early on, and based on my conversations with Ripple and some of their previous employees, the time series Oracle was the main piece of that they wanted Flare to produce for them. So now that we have oracles, price oracles on the XRPL, I think that and Chainlink will likely be the main players for that price oracle on the XRPL. So anyway, with that, I do think that Flare is going to be a major player. And if you do have to lock up any Flare to be able to mint the FXRP, it's going to have to be a high price to be able to match the collateral and for people to be able to do that. So excited to see, what takes place there. Full disclosure, I sold all my Flare at 29 cents on the way down after the distribution happened. I don't know if that was a good play or a bad play. I figured I could buy more later. But I know a lot of people that have just kept it, staked it on Bifrost, delegated it to a validator on the network, and have continually, reaped those rewards as those epochs have come through for the last 3 years, which is great for them. We have a lot of clients that have done that, and I think that that's been a great strategy for those that have stuck to it for compounding the amount of Flare that they had. We have KJ. He says, thank you for the super chat. He says, do you have any concerns about the percentage of returns getting lower as the crypto market matures? Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I mean, you've seen it with Bitcoin, right? Like if you look at Bitcoin on a logarithmic scale, the returns in the beginning were exponentially greater than they are today. And it's that way with any market as it matures. As a market cap grows in an asset, it becomes more and more difficult for people to move the market any direction, either lower or higher. You have to have more capital move in order to move the market. And for XRP, that's great, because if it really does move to the market cap, the level that I think it's going to be in, the quadrillions or quintillions, I know that sounds wild, even to hear myself say it back. The amount of money that it's going to take to move the asset, any amount, is going to be ridiculous. And so the stability of the asset over the long term, if there's enough volume to sustain it, will be incredible. And again, that's why I think it gets adopted as a tier one asset over the long term, is because I think it's going to be a very high value and a stable price. And it will continue to aggregate, price based on the volume of transactions that it's moving. And there'll be certain mechanisms by which they push liquidity into it with supply shocks in order to do that. They did that in 2017 when they locked half of it up in the escrow. That's when we saw XRP take off. So when you're able to limit the supply or the available supply for the public or retail or whoever is purchasing it or needs it, that's when you see these exponential price moves. Do you see it hitting $50? Yes, absolutely. This person says XDC not going to get into the thousands. I don't see XDC getting that high. And I'd love to be wrong about that. We have ways to generate returns on that also coming to market here for Digital Wealth Partners in Q2. But I think, over the long term, $5-10 is a very reasonable price for XDC. And that's predicated on just trade finance. If you saw it get adoption for other, like as an example, Comtech has issued gold warrants on XDC. Cool. That's a paper that has value that represents an underlying asset. You could do that with debt warrants. You could do it with debt notes. Any type of contract that's going to have value that's exchangeable, XDC lends itself very well to being able to tokenize that. And so if you saw the adoption for other applications, I might be wrong and you could see higher prices, but just with trade finance, that's where I think XDC could go. Thank you, Katie. She says, thank you for the super chat. She says, hey, Jake, what markets do you see being tokenized on the XRP ledger, as well the rough value size of each sector potentially being tokenized? Also, do you believe XRP will take the lion's share of the tokenization versus other blockchains? I have to take a sip of tea before we run this one down. It's great questions. And she definitely deserves it for the super chat. So thank you so much. All right. Where do we start here? Rough value and size of each sector being tokenized, and which markets do I see being tokenized on the XRPL? Cross-border payments, SWIFT, I think will be settled through XRP. It may not be on the XRPL, but I think it'll be settled through XRP. I think R3 could end up with the adoption and Corda for SWIFT, but they would still settle through XRP. So it'll get that volume. The FX market, Japan and SBI control about 10% of the trading for the FX market. I think that's likely going to end up on the XRPL. When we move to, a level playing field and everybody backs their currencies, I don't know that we'll have anywhere near the fluctuations that we currently have in the FX market, and that allows people to arbitrage currencies and make money. I think that'll end up being a lot less volatile than it is today. But I do think that those transactions, exchanging currencies, will end up on the XRPL. It's, positioned itself very well for that application. And again, I think R3 will end up settling Swift's transactions between intermediaries. So both those end up on the XRPL. And the size of these, so Swift settles, around $5 trillion a day. The FX market settles around $6.5 trillion a day. Back into the stock market is another one. Again, Project Ion, which was developed with R3 and the DTCC, Once there's enough liquidity and regulatory clarity for XRP, I think that will be settled through XRP. Is that tokenized on the XRPL? I don't care as long as it's settled through XRP, because that's where the volume comes in. And I do think that you'll see the tokenization of stocks. I just put out that video with Graham today about tokenized securities. I think HBAR and some of these other digital assets may end up with the tokenization of the stocks themselves, but I think they will settle back in between the clearinghouse and the broker on the XRPL. And that's, $6 trillion total in global stock markets. Just US is about 100,000 trades per day between the clearinghouses and the brokers. Close to, again, another 6 trillion a day in daily volume to be able to settle those transactions. And then you have commodities. You've got, gold by itself is $11 trillion. And all of these are derivatives, and there's a lot of paper on the market. So I don't know what's going to work out there. I don't know if they're actually going to be able to move to Basel III and have a one-to-one representation for the COMEX, and they're going to, not be able to manipulate the price like they have been in the past. I'm hoping that that's the case, and we'll see significantly. I mean, gold's already, $3,100, almost $3,200 today, because people are de-risking. They see that stocks are about to collapse because of the reverse carry trade, and it's a safety trade. A lot of people moving to gold as a hedge, but gold's going to get impacted too. People don't realize. So anyway, you've got oil, you've got gold, you've got corn, you've got other commodities. I'm not sure the size. I'd have to do more research on the commodity market, but it is significant. Futures for commodities is huge, and I think that could be settled via XRP. The majority, I would say at least 80%, if not all, of the global back-end settlement will be in XRP. And I'm going to make a prediction, and I could be wrong. This is my crystal ball. If I had one, global trade will be denominated in drops at some point in the next decade. So, XRP has drops, BTC has sats. I'm highly confident that global trade will be denominated in XRP or in drops over the next 10 years. And we'll see. That's just my bias. Take it with a grain of salt. So I think I went through everything here. Which markets, their current value and size, is XRP going to get the lion's share? And then you said versus which other blockchains? So peer-to-peer payments, highly likely to end up on HBAR or XLM's network, Hyperledger. Hyperledger is, huge for settlement between counterparties and peer-to-peer payments, merchant services. You've got things like Stronghold and Velo being issued as layer 2s with Soroban smart contracts on that network. Have videos on both of those here on the channel. I think that those applications will continue to be built out there, and we will see adoption for them. Not necessarily of those in particular, but I think that those are test cases for other people to move into that market. So again, you could have brokers that settle through Hyperledger between the retail investor and themselves, or through HBAR. And then between them and the clearinghouses, they would settle via XRP on the back end of those trades. And you would need Chainlink for the Oracle and Price Oracle and smart contracts and interoperability between those chains using CCIP or cross-chain, the protocol that they have. So anyway, I think I put out a video the other day. I don't know if it's been put out yet, but it talked about how Swift would have to adopt XRP, the XRPL, HBAR, and Chainlink in order to be able to actually settle the transactions the way that they need to. XRP would just be the settlement mechanism. And again, I'm cool with that. I don't necessarily need all of these things tokenized on the XRPL. I just need the volume for settlement for the token and the price to rise and it to be designated a tier 1 asset. So thank you for the fantastic question, and hopefully you guys got some value from that. We have JA. He says, completed onboarding on March 17th, added my wife's name for the signatures. By mistake, I asked for a correction days ago. Will I miss tomorrow's capital call and not be able to join this quarter? I think you'll be fine. again, I think you reached out before. So if you're accredited on your own and you are married, you guys are both accredited. Like, unless you have your assets in a separate trust or something, and that's what owns the XRP, and you somehow added her to that paperwork. If you're married and you set up an LLC, it's community property in the majority of states. There are a few states where that's not the case, but I don't anticipate that that's your issue. So I think unless MG Stover or somebody else is balking at it, which are fund admin, you're going to be fine. But I would verify that if you just want to email support@digitalwealthpartners.net. Kevin with the memberships. Thank you, brother. Appreciate all the memberships. Kevin gifts to everybody here on the channel. Kevin's been a long-time supporter. Kevin's known me. He's an OG up there in South Dakota at IT Outlets. If you need any IT services, Kevin is your man. Reach out to IT Outlets. They're awesome. But anyway, yeah, he's an OG. He was in the Beyond Broke Facebook group 5 years ago before became what it is today. We've got close to 1,500 members in the mastermind, which is just incredible to see the growth, and so many good people with aligned interest becoming part of that community. Is so blessed and grateful for everybody and their support, and then also the willingness to work with us and seeing the vision for where this is going. We're much stronger together than we are individually, and if we can come together and unify ourselves, you can move markets. We've already seen this with people in meme coins that run syndicates of people that come in and do stuff, and that's a poor way to do it. In the future, though, as an example, like with Digital Wealth Partners, we currently have $150 million under management, all XRP there, and we're able to negotiate on behalf of our clients because of that AUM. To really get things moving with our partners and negotiate rates and terms that you wouldn't be able to by yourself. And as the asset appreciates and we continue to aggregate AUM and people want to partner with us, we'll have more and more leverage in these conversations. And over the long term, I think it'll be a huge net benefit to be a part of Digital Wealth Partners and the mastermind and everything that we've built, again, as the XRP family. Rather than just on your own off in a corner somewhere, or away from everybody else that's been a part of this journey with you. So if that's something you're interested in, if you'd like to be part of the mastermind, we'd love to have you. And again, all you have to do is go to beyondbroke.com. It's right up here at the top, beyondbroke.com, and just enter the code beyondbroke, all capitalized, so caps lock, beyondbroke, the number 1, and then MO like Mary Oscar a month, gets you a free month there in the group. And again, we would love to have you. Let's see here. Make sure I'm not missing any super chats over here on YouTube, and then we'll grab a couple here on TikTok. April 2nd is going to crash us. Maybe that's the case. Still waiting on the reverse carry trade. I think that could play out in the near future. John over here, John Castro says, what about QFS? I have a strong opinion about that. And I love Mel. I've been on Mel's show. Mel's good people. But he's also a pizza guy. And he knows that, and he states it. Anybody shilling you QFS or telling you to move your assets somewhere, or that you need to register them on a different blockchain so they don't disappear, or that you need to buy stocks on Lobster Wallet, all of that is a scam. It's all a scam. Do not listen to them. It is a lie. There's no such thing as the quantum financial system. Okay. I hate to be the bearer of bad news on that. I have strong opinions on this. I do not like when people get ripped off. I had a client that lost $30 million on Lobster Wallet. Okay. So this isn't like, and they're not the only one. I know other people that have lost substantial amount of money on Lobster Wallet. It's nothing I would touch with a 10-foot pole. I do not believe in the QFS. It's anybody that shills that, again, love Mel, and there's a few other people, but that's not anything that I would be a part of or even listen to. So we got Carrie over here on YouTube. They say, appreciate all the info. Thank you for the super chat and for taking time out of your evening to listen. They say, if I send some crypto to someone and they sell and cash out, what are the tax implications for both parties? Good question. So if you send it to somebody and it's a gift, you would want to report that through a 709 with the IRS. And I know everybody's like, the IRS is going away. Hey, look, this is the tax code. This is how you would do it. So just bear with me. I hope it changes. I do too, but this is how it works. So if it's a gift, you would report that through 709. You have an annual gift exemption that you can give your children or other people of up to $18,000 worth of value per year. And that can be in kind. So if you wanted to move that to a separate wallet, gift that to your child, you're absolutely able to do that. Again, you would just want to file the 709 with your taxes to make sure that the IRS was aware that that transaction happened. Separate of that, if they were to then sell that, you gifted it to them. It was not an exchange for services, right? So there's no receipt of payment. If it is a payment, it is a taxable event for you. So, let's say you bought XRP at 50 cents. It's $2 today. And you exchange it for a roof. You pay, like David Schwartz, he paid $40,000 to put a roof on his house when ETH was $1. Oh. But anyway, in that ETH became taxable. Whatever his capital gains were then realized, whether they were short-term or long-term, in that transaction. And that's what you report on your taxes. Again, if it's a gift, no tax implications. You would just want to file that 709. For the counterparty, if they then took that crypto and sold it or cashed it out, they may not have any tax implications, or they might. Depends on the price at which they cash it out. So if they received it, XRP at $2, and they sell it at $2, no taxes. There was no gain. There was no loss. Nothing for them to report. And so most of the time, if you were to receive a payment in crypto and you were not using that as part of your treasury, you would want to record your basis and most likely exit it, right? So BitPay does this for you. You can pay in crypto. They tell you what, you, based on your cost basis, what you owe in taxes, and the counterparty, depending on what they get on the other side of the transaction, they can choose to receive dollars or whatever crypto they want as part of their payment. They would then report that new basis for them on that crypto. And then when they decided to sell it, they would have capital gains or capital losses, depending on, what the price was at the time they sold. So I know that was probably a lot, but I wanted to cover all the different aspects of the question and hopefully provide you as much value as I can in the short time that we have together. So I thank you for that. And I'm sure there's other people that got value from that as well. 0 to 100. Thank you for the super chat. They say, yeah. When Moon is in this Ishcoin 2018. You've been in it longer than me, but you're probably at least back to even if you bought it in 2018. Look, you're not the only one. I know many people that have been here for 7 years, like yourself, that are very frustrated with the amount of time that this has taken. My personal time frame for an investment is 4 years. You wouldn't, if you invested in XRP in 2018, you probably didn't think you were investing in private equity or an early stage startup, because that's about the same time frame that it's been that you've had your liquidity locked up and not usable, right? Unless you borrowed against it or arbitraged or done some other stuff with it. If it's just sat there, it's pretty much like dead private equity capital. Japan. We're waiting on Japan to raise interest rates, and that's going to be caused either from a spike in oil or them losing control of the yield curve. But when they have that emergency rate hike, you're going to see things unwind, and you're going to see price move for XRP to levels very quickly that people are going to have a hard time comprehending. I feel like your wait is going to be very well justified, in my opinion. Again, I haven't been here 7 years. I've only been here 5. So we've got Dr. Denise. Hey, ma'am. Thank you for the super chat. I love the 1111. Make a wish. What is the transition experience if your clients had old school accountants they trust and working with new school accountants after establishing an LLC with DWP? I think my accountant is not aware. So I'll say it this way. If you're scaling a business, think about it like this. The same accountant that you have when you start the business and when you make it to 1 million or 3 million or 5 million, probably the same accountant. You can probably get along with them But once you start getting into M&A, once you start getting into new business lines, once you start getting into other areas of business where you're generating enough revenue for significant write-offs and things that they haven't dealt with before, you probably want to get a new accountant, somebody that understands that level of business and has worked with other business owners in that capacity. And that's no different here. And again, you can have multiple accountants that you work with. You can have your traditional accountant that deals with your normal taxes for your business or what you've been dealing with them for. But again, if you were to see significant price appreciation on XRP and you start making 100 times what you were making previous, that accountant might not be the best one. If they haven't dealt with businesses and trust and other ways to be able to mitigate taxes, I would start having conversations with new people that may have strategies like that you can then leverage. So nothing wrong with that. We're always just a resource. We provide advisory. So we will bring in somebody that can help them either through doing the transactional accounting and the CPA work ourselves. We can be, a full service CPA if that's what you're looking for. But we always want to augment the ability for other professionals to perform and help our clients. So it's not a done for you. It's a done with you. And sometimes that done with you is replacing people with people that are just at a different level than the previous one. And sometimes it is working alongside your existing professionals that you have on your team. And I would encourage people to just get a team. You need an accountant, you need a CPA, you probably need an attorney, tax attorney. All those people are going to be good people to have on your team on the other side of price appreciation so that you can make sure that you're not being taken advantage of for whatever reason. And again, for us, like I had a call with a gentleman today, great gentleman, went up and met his family in Utah not too long ago. And he said, hey, I have this real estate attorney. I've known him for a long time. I trusted him implicitly. I trust you. I think you guys are doing a great thing, but I want him to look over all the documentation and just do one, I want to make sure before I move millions of dollars in XRP over to you guys. Well, absolutely, brother. Happy to give you all the documentation and share all of that with your attorney or whoever has the expertise to review that and make sure you're not getting screwed. We invite that. We want people to vet us and look at what's going on and make sure that it's above board. I've tried to structure this in the best way possible with the most compliance. There's been a ton of red tape and BS and just stuff that's been frictions in order to be able to get to market with returns and the ability to, borrow against. But at the same time, it provides a big moat and a bunch of protections for our clients that you're not going to get anywhere else or on your own if you were to try to replicate it. So anyway, that's my answer, ma'am. Thank you for the great question. And again, we want to work with you and your team, not necessarily replace anybody, but always provide the most value that we can. Man, you guys with the super chats, thank y'all so much. Try to get down here to the bottom before we run out of time. We are about an hour in here, and I do try to keep these digestible for people that want to listen back to them later on. So we'll probably wrap it up in about 30 minutes here. We got Honest Aim. How are you, sir? Hopefully you and your wife and your family are doing well. He said, our family trust meeting Saturday with the family was excellent. Glad to hear that. Thanks for all the work you put into place with Anchorage and DWP. With your help, our generational wealth, LLC, and trust are in place. That's really cool to see, man. Thank you guys for being so proactive and doing the work up front and making sure you're positioned well to be able to reap the rewards of your patience and investment in this asset class. When I started doing what I'm doing now and providing the advice and putting together the team that I have, I never would have imagined. I mean, I did. I had this big, large vision in my mind of how things would be one day. But to see it realized and be able to actually impact people and help them, so it's really fulfilling. So thank you so much for trusting us and working with us. And I'm very excited for the future for you and your family. And just the beginning of the journey. We have Disco R1 says, thoughts on Graham scaling back on his 30 to 50 trillion. He didn't scale back. He just said that his timing's been off. He still thinks that $50 trillion being tokenized is for sure. But he's also been at what he's doing there at Archex for 7 years and thought it would happen a lot faster. And luckily, he's had the backing of Ripple and other great partners to make sure that they got through the bear market and were able to be successful with what they're doing. And now with the acquisition of the broker dealer here, they can really, push into the U.S. market in a meaningful way. And we're going to be a part of that. We're having conversations with them. We'll see what that's going to look like, but I definitely want to help them as they move this direction. Hopefully they have some things in place here in the next quarter for us to be able to work together. Over here on TikTok, will XRP hit thousands? Again, global macroeconomic events transpire and certain things happen and there's a supply shock and we get the ETFs and, the reverse carry trade unwinds. And there's a lot of things that would be needed for that. But yes, if those circumstances do play out, then I do believe for sure it will be that amount and, likely $10,000 or more in 2026, 2027 is my time horizon for that. What happens when there is no more XRP to purchase on the retail side? The only way you'll be able to get access is through structured products, John. That's why the ETFs are important. That's why there's 17 of them. I think there'll be somewhere between 20 and 25 ETFs that are launched for XRP. We have the DRs, or the depository receipts for XRP, that we've launched with RDC. We're working to be able to actually have a structured product in place before the ETFs are live here in this early Q2. I don't know if we're going to make it or not. We got Paul's confirmation this week. Things seem to be moving pretty rapidly here, so I don't know that we're going to beat the ETFs, but we're trying. Kurt, are you still? No, these are other ones. Thank you for the super chats, Kurt. Hope you guys are doing well. Here we got a couple more. Got Lucas Walker. He says, while not guaranteed, of course, with what you know and expertise, how soon you think the Cambrian explosion happens and we see the almighty 1K XRP you rock? Appreciate that. Near future. I think here in 2025 is very reasonable. I don't know that it'll happen, tomorrow. It could. Again, it requires global macroeconomic catalysts playing out. So whenever it's the time for that, whenever those things unwind and that whole domino, all those dominoes fall, all of those lead to a 4-digit XRP in the near future. And I don't see how they can continue to just kick the can there in Japan. That's my rhyme for the night. They're not going to be able to. They're going to lose control of the yield curve. They can't print enough money to cover it, because if they do, they get hyperinflation. They're going to have to raise interest rates. That's the only thing that they can do in order to be able to lower the inflation and not have to print money. So, and then they could launch their CBDC. That could improve, that could remove about 2% of the inflation across their economy, from the instant settlement that will cause and the exchange and use of XRP between banks instead of intermediaries like Visa and PayPal and MasterCard and American Express. So I think that's what they're going to do in the very near future. And on the other side of that is where we're headed and the future that we're betting on. And then we got Rob. Thank you for the super chat, Rob. He says, by when do you see, everybody's worried about price and the time frame. By when do you see a $10 XRP? Do you think it will be when the SEC announces, or when the injunction is lifted, or it will take approval of the first ETF? All of the above. All the above, Rob. Those are all things that would have to transpire. I don't know about the injunctions being lifted. I think that the judge may keep that in place. I know people are hopeful for that, but that would allow Ripple to sell directly to people here in the US and avert them buying things off of the exchanges, and would allow for price to not move in the same manner that it might otherwise, because they would be able to source liquidity from them versus on the open market through the exchanges. So Ripple's escrow goes, it unwinds tomorrow. They get $1 billion XRP tomorrow. There was no distribution of the $1 billion XRP on February 1st. They didn't go anywhere. They're still in the wallet. So I don't know if they're holding those in anticipation of selling them, or if they're waiting till the price is higher to sell them, or they're holding them off the market so that supply is lower and price does rise. I don't know what Ripple's game plan for that is. Maybe it's all of the above, but we'll have to see what they do with the escrow tomorrow. It'll release in the morning, and we'll get to watch it. If you have like Whale Tracker, Whale Watcher, one of those, you'll get to see when each tranche of the $500 million XRP gets released, and then you can watch where Ripple moves them to, or if they don't, we'll see. We've got Katie again. Oh no, she already ran this one down. Thank you so much again for that one. I think a lot of people got value from that question. Lucas and Rob. It always kicks me up in the chat here once I answer them. We've got Idzi Terrell. Can you explain why you mean not Japan and the rates? What that will do? Why you mean not Japan and the rates? What that will do? Having a hard time deciphering this question here. So the central banks have a couple levers, not ledgers. Well, maybe those two, but they have levers they can pull. One is print money, QE, or increase M2 money supply. And that will cause inflation, but it does allow for liquidity in the economy, right? If you want people to borrow more money, lower interest rates also causes inflation because more people borrow more money and banks create more money, or M2. When you want to lower inflation, you reduce M2 money supply, or you raise interest rates. Both of these mechanisms move to deflation, which is what we're seeing in the U.S. economy right now. We haven't seen, the Fed print money since 2020. Overnight repo is pretty much zero at this point. They're not providing liquidity in that capacity. They don't have any more QE scheduled. We haven't lowered interest rates. We've just kept them, here at 4.5% for almost the past year. A lot of people anticipating that we will lower interest rates here in 2025 to increase the velocity of money. And, again, that'll cause inflation. So really the Fed's backed into a corner. You have rising job losses, a looming depression here in the United States. And you also still have inflation above 2%, which is their mandate. But if job losses creep up, they will have to lower interest rates. And that's what Trump, I think, is trying to force them to do with some of the tariffs and the pressure on the stock market and just the environment at scale, the way that it currently exists. They're kind of backed into a corner. And the only answer for that is restructuring the debt, a liquidity crisis, and the implementation of these other options that they would then have. So if you could increase velocity of capital or money across an economy, there's two factors for inflation, and that is M2 money supply and the velocity of money across an economy. Right now, we're at the lowest point ever for velocity of money across an economy. Everybody's holding on tight to their money, or they've got it somewhere invested, and they're waiting on something to happen. They're uncertain of the future. And so that causes money to move very slowly across the economy. People are only paying for what they need to pay for. They're not taking extra vacations. And that's a byproduct of the cost of living increasing, right? Like people don't have extra savings to go out and spend and do extra things or eat out or all the other stuff that people used to do back in the 90s when it was awesome, or the 50s or the 60s or whatever era you want to talk about. The boomers, they got the best of it. Just poking the bear. Anyway, they have not had a depression in their lifetime, which is unusual. Almost everybody, if you live 80 to 100 years, has at least one depression in your lifetime. They've had 2 recessions and no depression. So a lot of people anticipate that this is going to be the depression here at the end of their lifetime, which would be a bad time to have it, Anyway, so hopefully that I know that that's not exactly what you asked there, but I wanted to explain the mechanisms by which the central banks can increase inflation or print more money or ease inflation or cause deflation, and why they may do one thing or another based on, the circumstances that exist. So, Japan, again, needs to raise interest rates. They have inflation there. They can't print more money to be able to buy bonds. Otherwise, they cause inflation when they're doing that. So the only thing that they can do is raise interest rates to justify the bond prices, and that would cause the global monetary system to collapse. So they're in a rock and hard place also, unless they got something in the background that we all know they do ready to go. Then we got DMAC. DMAC says moving crypto from wallet to wallet is a taxable event. No, it is not. I thought you only get taxed on sales and trades. If the counterpart, okay, let me be specific here. If you own both of those wallets, no, not a taxable event. If you move it to somebody else's wallet and you pay them for their service or product with crypto, yes, it is a taxable event. Because you are using that value that you have to pay for that service. And whatever capital gains you have made, short-term or long-term, on those assets is taxable. If you paid at the same value that you bought it at, then no, not taxable. If you bought XRP at $2, you sent it to somebody else to pay for something because it was the weekend and you couldn't wire them money, and they received it at the same price that you purchased it, no taxes, no issues. But if it jumped to $3 in the 2 days that between when you bought it and when you sent the payment, now you got a taxable event. Or let's say it dropped 50 cents since you bought it at $3, now it's at $2, and you make a payment with it. Now you have capital losses that you can use against your income this year. So anyway, you want to understand your basis. You want to understand where it was traded to somebody else with a counterparty for a transaction. If you're sending it from your own wallet to your own wallet, like off an exchange to your wallet, your cold wallet, that is not a taxable event. If you're gifting it to a child or somebody in your family, again, you get up to $18,000 a year that you can gift to somebody, multiple people, tax-free. It is a write-off for you. And you would want to fill out a 709 at the end of the year for doing that. We've got Hunter. He says, you think Trump is in talks with Japan and telling them to hang tight so Congress can get regs in place to let this thing sail? I think that they've kicked the can a long time to be able to get everything into place with the dominoes and everything to be where it can be. They have everything where they can just run it through very quickly. And I think that that'll be the case on this. We saw with COVID how quickly Congress can move stuff through when they need to. And I think that they would be able to do that in a national security interest if there was a threat to the US dollar, which we heard Larry Fink talk about today. He said Bitcoin could be a threat to the US dollar if we don't get a hold of inflation. So, yeah, I think a lot of this has been, I told somebody the other day, I think a lot of this has been orchestrated since Pearl Harbor, personally. Anyway, that's my conspiracy theory. We'll go down that rabbit hole another time. YD25 says, what's your thoughts on Sologenic versus Ondo for tokenization? Sologenic just recently got a partnership that I think is going to actually allow them to do it. Up until recently, I would have told you Sologenic was trash because they haven't done anything. They made promises a long time ago. Again, like Flare, a lot of promises that they've just not kept or uphold. They said that they were going to tokenize securities. They built an NFT marketplace and never bought a broker-dealer or an ATS or did any of the things that would be required to make progress in that direction. But now they have a partnership that they've integrated with that might actually be a reality. So them and Corium, I don't know. Maybe they end up being used. Maybe there's something there that I've just overlooked. I know that there's been some price appreciation. Happy for the people that were holding Solo. I remember when it was 5 cents and I looked at it and I could have bought it and swapped from XRP into it. And then it ran up to $5 before the founders dumped on everybody. Oh man, missed out on a good run there. I look back, that's probably one of the regrets that because I literally looked at it at the day of the bottom and was talking to somebody about buying it and didn't buy any. Anyway, is what it is. But Ondo is tokenizing treasuries. They're partnered with BlackRock. They're not going anywhere. They are very good. Ondo is going to be around. Ondo's doing it right. Sologenic, still not sure. I'm hopeful. I'm a lot more hopeful than I have been in the past. Still not sure. A couple more super chats here, and then we'll wind it down for the night. We got Zeus Fox Knight. Interesting. That's a wild name, man. Well done. He says, hello. Once we have official crypto rules and regulations, in your opinion, what do you think the effect will be right after? I think that 99% of cryptos will get wiped out overnight. I think a lot of that's going to be caused by Tether when they sanction that, or it implodes, or whatever's going to happen with that. Or if it comes out that they're involved with child trafficking and all the stuff that has been moved over to that network, and it was a honeypot for all of those people. I don't have proof of that, just rumors. We'll see if that actually plays out like that or not. But yeah, I think once they roll regs for stable coins, we're going to get the majority of the crypto market is going to collapse on itself, and it'll roll into somewhere between 50 and 90 networks that are going to be around over the long term. I think there'll be a significant consolidation event. And if you're in those and the liquidity moves into them, you're going to be doing really well. Wayne with another super chat. Thank you, brother. He says, if the reverse carry trade does happen, will it cause a market crash? And will cryptos take a big hit initially? So far, the crypto market is following the ups and downs of the market and Bitcoin. There will come a point where things decouple from Bitcoin and the risk on assets when these assets start being used. Utility-driven assets will sing to a different tune than the rest of the assets. I think a lot of them may still follow Bitcoin until they do see some type of utility that drives the value or transactions on their network separate of a speculative market. I do think that there's going to be a significant crash across the majority of crypto when this unwinds. I think a lot of money, I say a lot of money. Look, the whole crypto market cap is less than $3 trillion. It's nascent in comparison to the majority of markets. Like I mentioned earlier, global stock market, $600 trillion. So it's 1/200th of the stock market, less than 1/200th of the stock market globally. Gold is 11 trillion. Like it's 12 trillion now because the price is appreciated. So it's 4 times the size of crypto, gold alone. It's a very small asset class. So, tens of trillions of dollars have been borrowed. You could see a significant collapse across all crypto, maybe even back to less than $1 trillion in total market cap. If we don't see liquidity pour into certain assets in that circumstance that drive them significantly higher to be able to offset that and actually save the system from crumbling. And I think you're going to see a drastic difference between the assets that are utility driven and have ETFs and those that are not. I think that there's going to be, Bitcoin and ETH, I think are going to crumble. I think they're going to lose a significant amount of value while other assets appreciate substantially and decouple from the rest of the market, all while chaos is going on. Excuse me, Dr. Denise, there she is again. But she likes the alliteration or the numbers in order here. 777. Thank you, ma'am. She says, if XRP is in a retirement IRA, when one dies and heirs need to spend IRA inheritance by law within 10 years after death, how to preserve XRP for generations? This is a good question. Hopefully, you are old enough to be able to draw from your IRA and you live to a late age, Denise, and you're able to use that XRP and pull it out in kind over your lifetime. However, if you are not, I've received an inherited IRA, and you do have to cash it out within 10 years. You can cash it out in kind. It doesn't have to be in cash. I trust us, DWP, Bitcoin IRA, many of the others don't require that you cash it out. Most of the other ones do. We allow you to do it in kind. And if you really push iTrust, or if you push Bitcoin IRA, they will liquidate it in kind for you. And so that would be my suggestion. They're still going to owe the taxes associated with that. So that's the other piece that they just need to be aware of. Or better solution. Man, I need another drink. You could make a trust a beneficiary, and then the trust would manage the IRA and then take the in-kind distributions into the trust. So that's probably the way that I would structure it. A lot of options with IRAs. I don't know if it's you said a retirement IRA. It doesn't sound like it's a Roth. It doesn't sound like it's a self-directed IRA. If it is a self-directed IRA and you can set it up as an IRA, LLC, or trust, also a fantastic way to do it. And then you can hold it yourself. You don't have to hold it with a custodian. There's a few different services, including us, that will do that for you. So anyway, those would be my recommendations. Just teach your children what it is, or whoever the beneficiaries are, and ask them that they would withdraw it in kind when they receive it, and not wait, because if they allow it to continue to appreciate, the tax implications are going to be greater when they do cash it out or take it out in kind. Excuse me. We've got YMMOT7. They say 100K XRP will always be the amount to be approved to join, or will it be lower the higher XRP goes? So the amount of XRP will come down as XRP appreciates in value. However, in the short term, that's likely where we're going to keep it, up to a $10 XRP. So when XRP is $10, we will likely move the minimum for digital wealth partners up to 1.1 million. So it'd actually be 110K XRP, but I don't think it's going to be at $10 very long. I think it's going to fly by that. And we will still keep it there. 1.1 million will be the minimum to work with digital wealth partners on the other side of price appreciation. And again, if XRP is $1,000, that's only, 1,100 XRP. A lot of people have that. So that's what we're looking at. And that's why we chose to put it there. And you'll be accredited. So we won't have to, we'll make sure, we're going to have options for non-accredited people. But aside from that, it makes everything much more buttoned up and easier to explain if there's an audit by the SEC or anyone else for digital wealth partners. Shade Spot, thank you for the super chat. They say, do you expect major job losses from AI and inflation money printing for the next 3 to 5 years? Is the average Joe going to struggle, or will stablecoins and tokenization drive growth even for the average Joe? I think that people are going to have to retool and re-educate themselves, and myself included, right? Like I'm using ChatGPT and Grok and some of these other ones on a regular basis. Almost every single day, they're implemented in some part of my life to be able to draft documents or put stuff together, ask questions, to be able to expedite things for myself. If you're not using AI to enhance your work, you are going to be behind everybody else that is. And so there's that piece. And I think it will remove a lot of the boring, redundant jobs. So accounting, I think, will get circumvented by AI in the next 3 to 5 years. CPAs, especially if they simplified the tax code, AI will replace in the next 3 to 5 years. Art is interesting. I think that people will augment their art with AI, which you're already starting to see. AI is going to disrupt and continue to disrupt almost all industries for the rest of our lives, especially if they ever get to a general artificial intelligence. If you're not plugged into that, if you're not using it, if you're not leveraging it, if you're not learning how to leverage it, you're going to be so far behind everybody else that it won't even be fair. And the beauty of the human consciousness is creativity, which you can't teach a computer. I don't care how sophisticated these LLMs get, or even if there is general intelligence and it can go through 10,000 or 100,000 or a million iterations of something in a very short period of time, your ability to craft creative solutions in situations and see things that a computer can't, it's always going to be there. And I think that we'll move into a period of like a renaissance. I think that people's normal needs, like just basic needs to live, will be met. I think that people will have affordable housing. I think that people will have food. I think that people will have the shelter and a basic income, you know, and people may have their thoughts about UBI. I don't think it's going to be a tax-based UBI. I think our government will have other means to generate value and then pay the public, similar to those countries in the Middle East and how they sell off oil and they pay a stipend to their citizens. Like, people there are very wealthy and they do very well, and they don't want for things. There's not a lot of crime. There's a lot of other things that's a benefit there. But I do think there'll be some, you know, constraints around that, and you can have your opinions, whether that's good or bad. I'm not here to debate that. You know, I don't think it'll be a dystopia or a utopia. I think it'll be whatever you make it. And I think that, you know, the constraints will always change. It's not, nothing ever stays stagnant. The only constant in your life is going to be change. And if you're able to adapt and move with that and take advantage of it and see the opportunities when those things happen, you'll do very well. If you have a victim mindset and you say, oh, woe is me, why is this happening to me? You know, they've replaced me in my job. You're probably not going to do very well, you know? So that's what I would say to it. The average Joe, the bottom, well, I shouldn't say bottom, 20% of the population would just sit at home and watch TV if they could. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not belittling that. I'm not saying anything about it. We saw that during COVID. Like, when people got paid a check and they made more money than they made at their job, a lot of people just sat at home. And they enjoyed their life. They enjoyed time off. They got to spend time with their kids. They got to do other stuff that they don't regularly get to do. And I think that that's great. And I think if you had some type of, you know, stipend, freedom dividend, whatever you want to call it, that was paid to people that allowed them to have a higher standard of living and things were taken care of, that they would be better off, and they would then be able to express their passions or go after things that were above and beyond that. And I think that's what we're going to enter into with a lot of this technology. I think a lot of the menial jobs that are boring and redundant and most people hate will be taken up by technology, and it'll be the creative stuff that we get to do, which is what humans were made to do and what we're good at. So it's just my outlook. Again, probably different than most people, but my 2 cents. We've got Group One Gave or One Gav. I don't know. Thank you for the super chat. They say, cheers, Megan's. Much love and respect from Perth. Hey, awesome. Will retail buying ability dry up before ETF approval? Love the good spirit. Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate you checking in from Perth over there. That's very cool. Perth's on the bucket list along with Sydney there in Australia. So yeah, I think that there's going to come a period in the next 6 months where you will no longer be able to buy, maybe even sooner than that. I think even by July, XRP, XLM, HBAR, Algorand, IOTA, XDC. I think a lot of those, you won't be able to get them. The only way you'll be able to get them is through the structured products. I don't think they'll be available for retail. I think high net worth individuals will seek out people that want an allocation through private investment banks, and private deals will be done, and people will be willing to pay above and beyond market price for things in order to get access to some of this stuff. Just similar to gold, right? Like, I don't know what the spot price is on gold right now, but you know, the market price is, you know, $3,100, $3,200. I'm sure that you're probably paying close to, you know, $3,400, $3,500 per ounce of gold at this point if you're going to a coin shop somewhere to purchase it. So I think it'll be very similar for XRP. I think there'll be a 10 or 20%, maybe even 100% markup for people to buy certain assets when it's no longer available for the public or retail. And I think that's it. I think we're through all of the super chats here. I didn't mention this, but we've had a few people mention it, so I just want to throw it up. If you do want an LLC to be able to manage your digital assets and make sure that you're set up for success on the other side of a liquidity event, please go to digitalfamilyoffice.io and you can use the code 50OFF, 50OFF, DAG, That's 50OFF, DAG, Gets you everything: EIN, articles of organization, certificate of good standing, the template for the operating agreement, the registered agent, a video on how to set up a bank account. We can't promise that you get a bank account, but a video that we will try to help you with. And here in the near future, you will also get a virtual office, and we are going to raise the cost of the LLC to $2,000 each here in the next 2 weeks. So again, if that's something that you've been thinking about, that's where the price is going, because we're going to continue to add value to that product. So if that's something you're interested in, we would love to provide that for you. Make sure you're set up for success on the other side of price appreciation. Again, that's 50OFF, DAG, Living Legacies, posted here. And there is the link for those that are wondering. Separate of that, we do have the mastermind like we talked about earlier. We would love to have you in the community if you have aligned interest and are looking for a good group of people to work with. Adrian says, what kind of LLC would it be? An investing one or digital assets? It's an investing company. It's a holding company to manage your investments that happens to manage digital assets. And that's the way we've set it up. And that's done for a specific reason. So it makes it much easier to get a bank account rather than having a crypto trading LLC. And it also doesn't silo you to short-term capital gains. So we've thought this through. We've worked with a lot of clients. We've set up over 700 of these LLCs for people. So again, would love to work with you in that capacity if you're interested. And then Living Legacy has posted the other here. We've got Beyond Broke, the number 1, and then MO gets you a free month there in the mastermind. If that's something you're interested in, we would love to work with you there. Again, if you have aligned culture and interest with people that, manage their digital assets and want to do well on the other side of the liquidity event. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. I hope you guys have a wonderful evening. I hope you had a great Monday and a great week ahead. And we will be back Wednesday night with the live. And until then, God bless, and we'll see you then.